Hello everyone and welcome to ArthaPoint CUET MA English preparation. Today we will be discussing about a very important poet from the age of Chaucer. For those who have seen the earlier video, we have already discussed about the age of Chaucer, the geopolitical conditions of the age, and a little about Geoffrey Chaucer. Now, there's another very important poet from this particular era whose name is William Langland. Now, you must know some particular things about this particular poet. Number one, who was William Langland? And second is his major works. Now, when we talk of his major works, you should just know one of his major works, that is Piers Plowman. Right. Now, why do I say that this is a very important poet and major work from with respects to your CUT paper? Because we have seen at least 3 to 4 questions in the past year examination regarding this particular poet. Right. Now, let us begin by discussing who William Langland was. When we talk of William Langland, one thing you must know is that William Langland belonged to a very poor family, right? So his background, his whatever social conditions that he has survived is something that he portrays in his work Piers Plowman, right? So first you should of course know what were the conditions of the era, what was the French influence, what was the Latin influence, what was the English influence that was happening, so that you can understand the place and the space that these particular poets belong to. Right. So William Langland grew up in a poor family, and Piers Plowman explains what life is like for an ordinary person. It talks of what and how an ordinary person should follow Christian values, should remain focused and diligently put his hard work in order to attain salvation. Right. Now, when we talk of Piers Plowman, so if you have seen earlier videos, you would know that one particular thing was very common when we talk of the age of Chaucer. It is the theme of dream vision. Right. So even Piers Plowman is written as a dream vision. It consists of 22 series of dream visions, right? And these 22 dream visions are together called as passus, right? So passus in Latin means steps, right? So this is again an important information. You could be asked in your CUET paper as to how many dream visions does Piers Plowman consist of, or what are these dream visions called. So you must know, right? Then we have a narrator and we have a protagonist. Right. So protagonist is Piers. He's of course a plowman. And the narrator is called Wills. Right. This particular narrator, he meets a series of allegorical characters throughout the poem. And Piers is the one that helps him see what it is like to be a true Christian. Right. Now, the poem begins with the narrator falling asleep at the Malvern Hill. So you must know the name of the hill. Now, at the beginning of this dream vision, the narrator sees a big tower at the top of the hill. So this is a tower, and he sees a fortress at, in the valley. So here's a fortress in the valley, right? This tower represents what we know as heaven, and this fortress in the valley represents what we know as hell. And the middle thing, the middle area that is there, it represents the worldly connections. It represents life of an ordinary person, right? Now, when we talk of Piers Plowman, so the theme of Piers Plowman, it represents the social and spiritual predicament of 14th century. It talks of life, it talks of capital sins, it satirizes corruptions of the clergy, of the church, the corruption that was so evident in this particular period. Now we know that during your Anglo-Norman period, we saw peasants revolt, right? We saw Black Death happening, right? So this was another step, another layer to it. People were becoming more and more conscious. People were understanding as to what was really happening, and the importance of education also brought by the Normans, and this transition into this age of Chaucer. People were becoming more interested in the social life, right? Now, Piers Plowman, so Piers is a person who attains salvation, and he attains salvation by showing dedication into his work. So he works hard. He's also visited by the deadly sins that are there, and even after being visited by the 7 deadly sins, he does not stop working. He shows the same dedication, and this is what the poet at the time was trying to convey to the ordinary people, that Christianity was not just about what the clergies were preaching. Christianity was above it. Christianity was more about your own rules, right? So this is in all what Piers Plowman is. So we see that eventually the narrator, he understands the fact of what the true Christian person should be, what is the life of an ordinary person, and towards the end of the poem, we find poet, he becomes more conscious. Now, there's another thing, that he needs three allegorical characters: do best, do better, and do well. Right? So, do well, it represents conscious. Do better, it represents grace. And do best, it represents charity. So you would see that there are a lot of characters that he keeps on meeting, he keeps on seeing in the particular dream. But you must remember these three particular characters, that are do well, do better, and do best. Now, we have already discussed that how Piers is a person who refuses to leave his work even after being visited by the 7 deadly sins. And he preaches that the only way to achieve God, the only way to go to this path of heaven, is by showing their own dedication, right? So I would quickly move on and discuss the past year. So these are past year questions with respect to this particular poem, Piers Plowman. So the very first question that we have here is, William Langland's Piers Plowman is a satire on. We've already discussed, you would be given 4 options. The correct answer here is, it is a satire on clergy or church, whatever option that you have been given. So it is a satire on the upper class, the class that was trying to preach the ordinary, right? The narrator of Piers Plowman falls asleep on. So we know the answer, it's Malvern Hill. I've already discussed it. So look, you must know certain nitty-gritties about each poem. I would be discussing only the things that could be asked, because of course you have to go through the text. But here we would only be discussing the points that are important from the point of view of your examination, right? In William Langland's Piers Plowman, Piers finally appears as a good Samaritan, right? So a good Christian. Okay. So these 3 questions are from your past year. Go through this text if you can. If not, go through a thorough summary. Understand what the poetry is trying to communicate. And of course, whatever points that I have pointed out about the allegorical characters, number of dreams that this poet sees, where does this poet falls asleep, where does the narrator falls asleep, what is the name of the narrator, and of course, a little about William Langland that we have already discussed, right? So with this, we end William Langland. We also have other certain poets from this particular era. For example, we have already discussed about Geoffrey Chaucer. So whenever this particular age comes, and if there's a question, there's a good chance that you would majorly be asked about Geoffrey Chaucer. If not, we have certain poets. First is William Langland. Then you have John Wycliffe. Right, so John Wycliffe, you have Wycliffe's Bible. Right. So Wycliffe translated Latin Bible into English. This was done because at that time there was lack of knowledge amongst people. So it was whatever the clergies were preaching, only that was made, so people could only understand that much. Therefore, John Wycliffe wanted people to read more. They wanted people to understand what is the meaning of true Bible. What is Bible trying to preach? Right. This one thing that I've missed here is another important point, that this is written in West Midland dialect. You must know this fact that it is written in West Midland dialect. Right? Moving on, so we have John Wycliffe, we have, so we have John Mandeville. John Mandeville wrote a travel memoir. This travel memoir was used as a reference by both Columbus and Marco Polo. So you would find a travel memoir of Sir John Mandeville, Travels of Sir John Mandeville. I would just write it down there. Travels of Sir John Mandeville. Then we have John Gower. Right. So John Gower was a good friend of Chaucer. We have a few of his major works. One of it is Mirror de l'Homme. Then we have Vox Clementis. Then we have Confessio Amantis. Right. So these are three important other poets that I have to tell you about. Then we also have John Litigate. Right. John Litigate was again a poet who was heavily influenced by Chaucer and Boccaccio. Right. So most of his works are a translation from Boccaccio's work, and if not Boccaccio, then Chaucer's work. Right. And lastly, so he also wrote very important. So John Litigate's most important work is his Seas of Thebes. Now, when we talk of Seas of Thebes, so Seas of Thebes was written as a response to Chaucer's Canterbury Tale. He also wrote one story as a complement story to the Knight's Tale. So you must know this, that he in Seas of Thebes has written a complementary story to the Knight's Tale, right? And lastly, we have Thomas Hawkley, right? So I have in large discussed about all these poets because, of course, because of the time constraint, I cannot talk to you about each poet in detail, of course. But in case you want to know more about these particular poets, you can let me know in the comment section below. Also, you can contact at 83686-63950 for a detailed course wherein I have talked about all the major poets and their works from the age of Chaucer. So in case you want a video on any particular poet, you can of course get in touch with me, and you can write it down whatever questions you have in the comment section below. Thank you. Take care.